Hello, welcome to ARIN3620 Researching Digital Cultures. I'm Chris Cheshire, Associate Professor in Digital Cultures here in the Discipline of Media Communications at the University of Sydney. I'm the coordinator of this unit. You might have met me already. Whether you're joining us as a Digital Cultures major from elsewhere in media communications or from another part of the university entirely, it's great to have you here. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that I'm recording this lecture on the unceded lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students joining us in this unit. In a unit that's entirely about how knowledge gets made, this acknowledgement carries particular weight. These lands have been a site of systematic knowledge production for more than 60,000 years. Indigenous knowledge systems are sophisticated, relational, and grounded in country like this. They encode ecological, astronomical, legal, and historical knowledge. They're sustained through story, ceremony, and kinship, and they come with their own protocols about who may hold knowledge and who may pass it on. As we spend a semester learning the research traditions of the university, it's worth remembering that they're neither the only nor the oldest ways of knowing on this continent, and that questions we'll treat as cutting edge, like the ethics of collecting and sharing other people's knowledge, have been thought about here for a very long time. Let me start with a question to you. How would you actually study digital culture? Not just have opinions about it, we've all got those, but study it. How would you observe a fan community without disturbing it? How would you interview content creators about things they may never have put into words? How would you make sense of 1 million posts when no human being could ever read them all? How do you read an app's interface the way a literary scholar reads a novel? Those are the questions this unit is built around. ARIN3620 is a research methods unit for sure, but I want to say straight away, it's not a unit where you sit back and learn about methods in the abstract. It's a unit where you do research, where you turn your own curiosity about digital cultures into a real researchable project and carry it through a full research design process. Here's the shape of the semester. You'll propose a research project of your own. You'll join a small team formed around the strongest project ideas in your tutorial. Then you'll pitch a project as a 3-minute video. And by the end of the semester, your team will have produced a complete, methodologically rigorous research proposal. That's the same genre of document that researchers write to win funding, ethics approval, and admission to honours or to postgraduate programs. Along the way, you'll get hands-on experience with the main methods that digital cultures researchers actually use: digital ethnography, interviews and focus groups, surveys, qualitative and computational text analysis, platform and interface analysis, and visual analysis. Every week has a practical workshop component. You won't just read about focus groups, you'll run one. You won't just hear about surveys, you'll write one, field it, and analyze the results. By the end of this unit, you'll know how knowledge about digital media and society actually gets made, and you'll have made some of it yourself. And that's a skill that matters well beyond the university. Employers in media, tech, policy, and communications are constantly asking, what do our users actually do? What do our audiences actually think? And how do we find out? This is where you learn to answer questions like that with evidence rather than vibes. Before we get into the details of the unit, let me introduce myself properly, because the way I teach research comes directly out of the way I do research. I've been researching digital cultures since before we called them digital cultures. We called them new media or just media studies. My long-running theoretical project is the idea that computers are best considered not as calculating machines or even as communication media, but as what I call invocational media, devices that call upon and that call things up for us. Every time you type a search query, tap an icon, or say, "Hey Siri," you're performing a small act of invocation, summoning text, images, sounds, and actions from complex technical systems. If you've studied with me before, you've probably heard me talk about it already. I developed this argument over many years, and it became a book, Invocational Media Reconceptualizing the Computer. The reason I mention it is not to sell you the book, although I can tell you where to buy it. It's to make a point about research. A single good concept, patiently developed, can reorganize how you see an entire field. That's the kind of intellectual work this unit invites you into, at a smaller scale. My empirical research has followed digital media technologies as they've moved through culture. I've written about internet cultures, computer games, and even digital toys. More recently, my work has focused on social and cultural robotics, how robots are entering everyday life, not as science fiction humanoids, but as vacuum cleaners, delivery machines, toys and companions, and on the smart home and voice assistants, asking what happens when domestic spaces we live in start listening, speaking, and acting. Studying these things has required exactly the toolkit that this unit teaches. I've done ethnographic observation of robots in public spaces. I've interviewed people about the devices in their homes. I've analyzed online communities, marketing materials, interfaces, and images. No single method could answer the questions I care about, and that's a theme you'll hear again and again this semester. One more thing about me, I genuinely find this stuff fascinating, and I've built this unit with the belief that you will too. Digital cultures isn't a specialist topic. It's the water you swim in. You are already experts in the life worlds of the platforms, games, and communities you inhabit. What this unit adds is the craft of turning that lived experience into knowledge that other people can trust, check, and build on. You'll also meet our team of tutors who run your weekly tutorials and workshops and act as supervisors of your research teams. And you'll hear from other researchers and digital cultures programs through video interviews across the semester, talking about how they actually do research. Research is a craft, learned partly by watching other people practice it, and we built that into the unit. Now, something practical, and I want to be completely unambiguous about it. You need the textbook. The textbook is Simon Lindgren and Moa Eriksson-Krutrock, Researching Digital Media Society, published by Sage in 2024. This is not a recommended text, not a background reading, not something you can get by without. It's the spine of the unit. Most weeks are anchored to a chapter of this book. The workshop exercises assume you've read it, and the methods chapter will be your handbook when your team is designing its research proposal. When I redesigned this unit, I chose this book because it does exactly what we need. It covers the full repertoire of digital cultures methods, ethnography, text analysis, computational approaches, visual and platform analysis, in one coherent, readable volume, written for exactly your level. There are readings accessible in the reading list that supplement the textbook and go to more depth, or address topics like interviews, focus groups, and surveys that aren't covered by the textbook. You'll have several ways to get the textbook. You can buy the paperback through Woods Lane using the promo code SAGE20, which gives you 20% off the considerable list price. You can buy a lifetime digital copy or rent one for 180 days through VitalSource. This is the cheapest way through the whole semester. Digital copies are also available through Amazon Kindle, Google Play, ebooks.com, and Kobo. All the links and the promo code are on the Canvas site under textbook. The library also has copies, including on short loan, but there are many more of you than there are of library copies, so please don't build your semester around that. Get it as soon as you can. When you sit down in the second tutorial, having read chapter 2, and half the room hasn't, you will understand why I've laboured this point now. Now let me tell you about the thing that makes this unit different from most units you've taken. In ARIN3620, nobody hands you a topic. This unit is where you're expected to develop your own research ideas. From the first assignment onwards, you'll be identifying problems worth investigating, formulating questions worth asking, and building the scholarly groundwork to support them. I know from experience that this feels uncertain at first. Some of you may be hearing this and feeling slightly alarmed. Good. Genuine research always begins in uncertainty. The capacity to notice something interesting in digital culture and turn it into a researchable project is the central skill this unit develops. And it is a skill, which means it can be learned, and we've structured the whole semester to teach it. The second distinctive thing, after the first assignment, this unit is collaborative. You'll do your major work in project teams of 2 or 3 people. We prefer 3, formed with your tutorial around compatible research ideas. Here's how that works. For assignment 1, every student proposes a project of their own, individually. Your tutor then evaluates all the proposed projects and chooses a short list of the strongest and most workable ideas. Teams form around those shortlisted projects, and from that point on, the video pitch, the conference presentation, and the final proposal are all team efforts, with regular group supervision sessions with your tutor along the way, just as research students meet with their supervisors. Why do we work this way? Because research is genuinely collaborative. Almost all significant research is conducted in teams. Learning to develop a shared intellectual project, to negotiate ideas, to divide work fairly, and to depend on one another isn't a soft skill bolted onto the unit. It's one of the things the unit teaches. And to keep things fair, every team assignment includes an individual contribution statement, so your own work within the team is visible and accountable. So, the semester has a 3-act structure, and you'll see this arc on the Canvas front page. Act 1, weeks 1 to 5. Propose. On your own, you'll find an object of study, write research questions, and build an annotated bibliography. And you'll give the project a title. Act 2, weeks 5 to 9, pitch. You join a project team and make a 3-minute video thesis arguing for your research. Act 3, weeks 10 to 13, propose again, properly. As a team, you design a complete, methodologically coherent research proposal. Each act builds on the last. Nothing you do in the unit is thrown away. Everything feeds forward. But you can fix it as you go. So, where are you supposed to get research ideas? Let me give you some honest advice, because this is the question that worries students most. It's the wrong thing to be worried about. The best research ideas don't come from scanning the news for big, important topics. They come from your own digital life. Bring your curiosity about the digital worlds you already inhabit. The best projects usually start there. You are already inside communities, platforms and practices that most researchers would need months of fieldwork just to access. The group chat that has its own economy of in-jokes, the fandom that migrated platforms after a moderation dispute, the marketplace where sellers have developed elaborate trust rituals, the game where the real action is in the trading. You know where the interesting things are. Research starts by taking one of them seriously. The second piece of advice, be specific. Specificity is the difference between a topic and a project. Social media and books is a topic, but it's unresearchable because it's about everything and therefore nothing. How Book Talk reshapes what young readers buy. Now that's a project. It names a community, a practice, and a question. When you have an idea, push it downwards. Not gaming, but which game, which community, which practice, on which platform. You can't study the internet. You can study a corner of it well. Third, test your idea against 3 questions. Can it actually be answered by doing research? By observing, asking, counting, analyzing, rather than by speculation or opinion? Is it small enough to investigate properly in a semester if you did the actual research? And would the answer matter to anyone beyond you? If you can say yes to all 3, you have the beginnings of a research question. I wanted to give you more help in working out what you're going to research. So I thought one way to familiarize yourself with how digital cultures academics get their ideas is by recording interviews with them, with research active colleagues in the discipline, some of whom you've already had as teachers. I asked them what inspired them to become a researcher, how they come up with the great ideas, how they choose theory and methods, and what value learning research gives to your future career. You can access these through the resources page on the website. Also on the resources page, I've created an AI tool to give you advice on best research practice. I've called it Research Method Shop because it's a workshop for learning research methods. Use it to experiment with different choices in designing your research with no risk or hassle. Enter a project title, research questions, methods, discipline, and your own notes, and it'll give you a detailed report evaluating your decisions and giving you usable feedback. If you're not happy, try it again and again. We'll add more things to the resources page as the semester progresses. So starting out, your first tutorial task in week 1 is directly connected to the question of what to research. In the first hour of the first tutorial, we run an introductions exercise, the kind. You introduce yourself to the staff, to the class, your name and major, and then you'll name a technology you'd be interested in researching, how you use it, and the communities it's part of. And the instruction here is be specific. Rather than talk about smartphones, talk about an unusual app you use and who you use it with. Rather than PlayStation 5, talk about a particular game and the people who play it. So between now and your first tutorial, do a little private fieldwork on yourself. Notice what you use, what you just can't stop using, and what puzzles you, and what's changed lately. Come to the first tutorial with something real. That 30-second introduction in that class is the seed from which your Assignment 1 project, and possibly your whole semester, will grow. Students who arrive with a genuine curiosity in hand are the ones whose projects come together early and calmly. So here's the 4 assessments. Let's walk through them in detail, because once you've seen them together, you'll see the logic. Each one is a stage in the life of a single research project. You'll be able to make some modifications on the go, but you need to sort of make sure you start out with the right settings. So you're not doing 4 unrelated pieces of work. You're doing one thing, developing a research project, and being assessed at 4 moments along the way. Assignment 1, title, questions, annotated bibliography. This is an individual project assignment due at the end of week 4, and it's worth 25%. Every research project starts the same way. Something catches your attention. You work out what you actually want to know about it, and you find out what other people have already said. And that's this assignment. You'll propose a project title. Think of the title as your project's first argument. It should name what you're studying and hint at how you're approaching it. You want to try lots of different sort of options for your title and choose between them, talk to people about it and so on. Then you'll write one main research question. Again, this will take a lot of refining to come up with a good research question, and then 2 sub-questions that go into more detail about what you want to know, what you want to ask. And you'll build an annotated bibliography by putting together a list of 12 scholarly sources. So it's annotated. It's a bibliography because you have a list of sources, books and articles and so on, and it's annotated because you write details about it, and you submit that. You have to identify, do a broad sweep of literature, and then choose a list of 12 sources in 3 sets of 4. 4 conceptual sources, which is the theoretical ideas your project thinks with. 4 methodological sources, scholarship on the methods your project would use. And 4 field sources, the existing research that's closest to your object of study. For each source, you write 80 to 100 words explaining not just what it says, but what it does for your project. There's a word template on Canvas with the structure and APA formatting already set up. And remember what I said earlier, the projects proposed in Assignment 1 are the pool from which your tutor forms the project teams. So propose something you really care about, because you might be living with it and persuading others to live with it for the rest of the semester. Assignment 2, the 3-minute video thesis. In your assigned teams, due at the end of week 8 and worth 25%, 1 3-minute video plus a short exegesis written together, totaling 200 words for each student. That's 1 exegesis and 600 words for groups of 3. This assignment asks your team to translate your developing project into a 3-minute video, modeled on the 3-minute thesis format that research students compete in around the world. It's a competition. It's not a summary of everything you know. It's a persuasive act of research communication. Start by hooking your audience inside your object of study. Establish what you're studying with enough specificity that they can picture it. Present your questions and the puzzle behind them, and close with the stakes, why this work matters. Compression like this is a form of thinking. Deciding what to leave out forces you to identify what your project is really about. And in a digital cultures unit, the video format is not incidental. You're working in the medium your field studies. The videos will be screened in class in week 9 with feedback and Q&A. There are some details in the assessment about the different types of content that you might include, including 2 camera pieces, historical footage, AI-generated footage, and so on. So have a look at the details in the assessment. Then in week 12, there's a conference-style paper presentation, 5 minutes per team in your tutorial, but this one's ungraded, 0%, but compulsory. Everyone has to be there and hopefully valuable. 1 week before the final proposal is due, your team presents it, just like other researchers test their work before finalizing it. Talk about the state of the field and the gap, your research questions, your conceptual approach, your method and its ethics, and why the project is significant. Now, significance is a tricky one because it can be a number of different levels. So it can be its significance to a subfield or a field, but it can also be significant for society or for particular groups in society. Then you take questions at the end of your presentation, and that time, question time, is the most valuable part of the whole exercise. Every time someone's confused in the room, it points to a weakness in the proposal, and you've still got time to fix it. And every question you can't answer is a design decision that your team hasn't yet made. That's why it's ungraded, because it exists only to make the thing that's graded better. And finally, the project proposal is the major work of the unit. In teams, you write 2,000 words per student, so in other words, 6,000 words for teams of 3. And it's worth 50% due at the end of semester. Each team member also, now in this case, you write an individual statement explaining your contribution to the project, and you don't have to show it to the other students. You can, but you don't have to. Notice that you don't actually carry out the research. That's really important. In order to carry out a university research project, you need to get clearance from the ethics committee to do human subjects research. So you mustn't go out and do research that you actually use. This is the second part of week 1 lecture. So now let me take you through the semester week by week so you can see how the whole thing unfolds. Don't worry about memorizing it, it's all on Canvas with a detailed overview page for every week that we'll gradually reveal. What I want you to get is an idea of the whole journey ahead. Week 1. What is digital cultures research? We establish what's distinctive about researching digital media and society, the systematic study of how technologies, platforms, practices, communities, and institutions shape one another. Before you come to this class, you'll read chapter 1 of the textbook, plus one scholarly article assigned by your surname. Look on Canvas. Depending on your surname, you need to read a particular article. One of them is a study of humour in game live streaming. Another is a Chinese dating app. And the third one is platformed racism on social media. And we'll take those articles apart to see how research arguments are built. And of course, our one is the introductions exercise I've already flagged. So come with the technology in mind. Week 2 is why we mix methods. Digital cultures can rarely be understood with a single method. Remember what I said about my own robotics research. This week explains why researchers combine methods and how each method reveals a different dimension of a problem. A useful way to think about it, which will run underneath the whole semester, is the distinction between observing what people do and asking them about it. Both matter. That is, both matter, both observation and interviews often disagree in interesting ways. The workshop this week is intensely practical, a literature search across library databases and newer AI-assisted tools, always checking citations against the originals, and you'll write your first annotation. This is the engine room for assignment 1. In week 3, we look at the research process. This is the week your project starts taking shape. You'll frame a field site, the community, platforms, practices, and boundaries of your study, and draft your major and minor research questions and candidate titles with peer feedback. Everything from this week flows straight into assignment 1. Week 4, digital research ethics. Just because something's publicly visible online doesn't mean it's ethically free for the taking. We work through real scenarios, consent, anonymity, quoting posts, screenshots, vulnerable communities, platform data, and you'll draft an ethics statement for your own project. Digital research constantly runs ahead of the ethical frameworks built for earlier eras. And it's true of AI, which makes ethical judgment a live skill, not a form to fill in. Assignment 1 is due at the end of this week, and then your tutors form the project teams and the unit changes gear. Now we enter the methods weeks. 5 weeks, 5 ways of making knowledge. For each one, let me give you a taste of the kind of project that would use it and why that method and not another. Week 5, digital ethnography. Ethnography is a sustained, attentive engagement with a digitally mediated setting, observing, sometimes participating, writing field notes, and reflecting on your own position. Imagine a project on late night Study With Me streaming communities on Discord and Twitch, asking how strangers create a sense of shared discipline and companionship. Well, you couldn't get at that with a survey. The thing you're studying is the atmosphere, ritual, unwritten norms, the texture of interaction as it unfolds. Only patient observation over time reveals it. And that's when you choose ethnography, when the question is about how a community actually lives, rather than what its members say about it. In a workshop, you'll conduct a guided ethnographic exercise and learn to write field notes that are descriptive, analytical, and reflexive. Week 6, interviews and focus groups. Now these methods generate accounts of experience. They're how you ask. Suppose your project asks how small content creators experience the pressure of being made visible by algorithms. So content creators have an analytics dashboard that maybe causes them a lot of anxiety. How many hits have they got on their post? And they might have folk theories about what the algorithm wants in order to show your content more broadly. That inner experience is invisible to observation. No amount of watching TikTok tells you how it feels to be ranked by it. You have to ask carefully, openly, ethically, and the craft lies in questions that invite reflection rather than rehearsed answers. Focus groups add another layer. People negotiating, disagreeing, building on each other, which is itself data. In the workshop, you'll rotate through the roles of facilitator, participant, and observer. Surveys. Surveys turn research questions into standardized questions that many people can answer. They trade the depth that you might get in an interview for breadth. So say your project asks how widespread dating app fatigue is among university students, and whether it varies by gender, age, or time on apps. An interview can tell you what fatigue feels like. Only a survey can tell you how common it is and how it's distributed across populations. That's when you reach for a survey, when your question is about patterns across a population. But the apparent precision of survey numbers can conceal ambiguity and bias baked into the questions. So design matters more than just the sample size. In the workshop, each group builds a short survey and other groups complete it, and you analyze real responses on the same day. Qualitative text analysis. So much of digital culture is text, posts, comments, bios, reviews, and texts don't transparently report reality. Their wording and framing make a difference. Picture a project on how people argue about authenticity in the comments under AI-generated art. What counts as real art? Who gets called a fraud? What values are invoked? So close, systematic coding of those threads, building categories of the posts and the comments, finding patterns and telling exceptions is how you turn a pile of comments into an argument about cultural meaning. You choose this method because the question is about meaning making, not frequency. The workshop is a hands-on coding exercise on a shared corpus. Computational text analysis. Now, scale. Suppose you wanted to know how the language of a community, like the subreddit r/ChatGPT, shifted over 2 years, from expressions of wonder initially with ChatGPT to practical workflow, from the novelty of chatting to ChatGPT for the first time to complaining about it. 200,000 posts. You might have found, well, no one can read them all, and hand-coding a sample might miss the slow drift you care about. Computational analysis, and it's controversial whether AI can do this sort of analysis, counting word frequencies, making comparisons over time, visualization that can see patterns at scale that no human reader can. But the critical lesson of this week is that computational outputs are not self-interpreting. They depend on choices about data, categories, and tools. And big data comes with big blind spots. We'll also screen your 3-minute videos in the class this week with feedback and Q&A. Platform and interface analysis. Platforms don't merely host activity, they format it. What's visible, what's rewarded, what's possible. Consider a project asking how a language learning app like Duolingo produces daily engagement with features like streaks, gems, leagues, and that passive-aggressive owl that keeps bugging you. There's no community to ethnograph here, and no one to interview that could answer this. So the object of study is the design itself. You might combine that with interviews of users, for example. But this method is the walkthrough, systematically stepping through an app's screens, defaults, and prompts, reading the interface as a text that embodies a business model and a theory of its user. This is a method developed in digital media research for digital media, and you'll apply it in the workshop to platforms relevant to your projects. Visual analysis. Digital culture is intensely visual, and images demand interpretation rather than being treated as self-evident. Think of a project on the visual conventions of fitness influencing on Instagram. composition, bodies, light, setting, and what those conventions communicate about health, discipline, and aspiration. Counting posts won't get you there. You need a systematic framework for reading images. And in this week's workshop, we also turn the lens around. You'll use generative AI tools to create an image for your own project's front page and document your prompts, choices, and revisions. Because making images is a powerful way to discover the conventions you've been analyzing. Week 12, research design, putting it all together. The methods tour is done. Now your team integrates questions, literature, ethics, methods, and analysis into a coherent design and presents it as the 5-minute conference-style paper I described earlier. Presentation, questions, feedback, and a week to act on all of it. And week 13, writing research proposals. This is the final week, which focuses on proposal writing as a proposal writing clinic. You'll bring your draft, which is hopefully quite well developed by then, work through its structure section by section, exchange targeted peer review, and troubleshoot the last problems before submission. So it's really important you have a draft by this stage. We'll also run any remaining pitches and reflections. Then your team submits the final project proposal, and this is the part I always enjoy. You'll finish the semester holding a document that's not a student exercise, but a genuine piece of research design. I'll look forward to reading that too. Throughout all of this, remember the rhythm. Read the chapter before class, do the workshop in class, post to your research blog after the class or to the discussion post. 2 hours of reading and preparation, and about 4 hours of project work most weeks. Keep that rhythm and the unit will feel busy but never overwhelming. Before the practicalities, an acknowledgement of a different kind. This lecture was made with AI assistance. The script and the slides were drafted in collaboration with an AI system, Claude, working with my unit outline and the content of the Canvas site, and then revised, and importantly, signed off by me. I'm telling you this for 2 reasons. First, transparency about method is the ethic of this whole unit and applies to me as much as to you. Second, it raises exactly the questions this unit exists to ask. Some of you may feel that this is cheating. Some of you may conclude that your lecturer will soon be out of a job. Maybe. But 2 things interest me here. One is that prompting turns out to be a craft. You get out of these systems what you can specify, evaluate, and revise, which is not so different from what makes a good research question. The other question of which kinds of knowledge production remain stubbornly The other is the question of which kinds of knowledge production remain stubbornly non-AI, being there in the field, earning a community's trust, noticing what nobody thought to write down, taking responsibility for a claim. Now you'll be using AI tools yourself this semester. In week 2 for literature research, using Research Method Shop, and week 11 image workshop. Under the same rule I applied here, the tools may draft, but you must verify, and the authorship, judgment, and accountability stay with you. So let's finish with some practicalities. As with most units on the university, everything's on Canvas. There's some important things in there, apart from the unit outline, details about the assignments. There's a page on expectations, which you should kind of read carefully. There's the weekly modules, and I'll reveal some of them as we go through the semester with overviews, tutorial, workshop information. There's a staff contacts page. There's a resources page, which currently has interviews with digital cultures researchers and the research method shop. We'll cover that in class, but you can experiment with it straight away. Don't forget to talk with your tutor or the convener where that's kind of appropriate and important. Your tutor is the main point of contact, and you'll see them for 2 hours every week. Email them when necessary and allow them time to reply. You can email me about the whole unit of study, and you can organise a Zoom meeting or meet me in person in Woolly. It's really important to communicate and stay in touch with your team members, your tutor, and the convener where that's appropriate. If you're sick or have other emergencies, tell your team, email your tutor as soon as possible. And if you get special consideration or you're registered with Disability Services, please note it on your assignment so we don't miss it. If you're having any trouble, tell someone about it and escalate it, because there's things that we can do. 4 things to do this week. First, get the textbook, as I was stressing, the Lindgren and Kutrock Researching Digital Media and Society, either through Woods Lane with the Sage 20 code or Vital Source, or any of the digital vendors listed on Canvas. Second, read Chapter 1 and your surname assigned article before your first tutorial. We're really, getting started. Third, and start today, pay attention to your own digital life and choose the technology you'll talk about in the introductions exercise. Something specific, something that you actually use, something you're genuinely curious about. Don't opt for the most obvious and widespread thing. Think through what you use and how you use it. That's particular to you or to groups that you belong to. And fourth, have a look around at the Canvas site so you know where everything is. I want to leave you with this. Most of what's written about digital cultures in the press, on the platforms, in everyday conversation is opinion, anecdote, and marketing. The ability to do better than that, to find out what is actually going on, and to show you're working is rare and it's valuable. 15 years from now, you may not remember the details of the walkthrough method or the rules of survey sampling, but you'll still know the difference between a claim and a finding, between a topic and a question, between noticing something and knowing it. That's what this unit is really teaching. You're going to notice something interesting in the next 2 weeks, some corner of the digital world that deserves a closer look. Hold on to it. It might just carry you through the whole semester. I'm looking forward to seeing what you choose to study, so I'll see you in week 1.